The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Carissa Wayansky, Figure Skating Programs Manager at US Figure Skating. You've all probably seen several emails from me, so thank you so much for joining us for the Excel webinar tonight. We're really excited about this program and excited to share it with you all. So I will hand it over to Patrick O'Neill, Membership Chair with US Figure Skating, for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Carissa, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Patrick O'Neill, and I am Chair of the Membership Committee with US Figure Skating, as well as Chair of Seminars and Webinars with the Professional Skaters Association. On behalf of the US Figure Skating Program Development Committee and the Professional Skaters Association, I'm very excited to tell you all that we have over 1,500 of you signed up for tonight's webinar. This is a record for US Figure Skating, and I think we had to actually purchase additional space to accommodate everybody. So that's a great thing, and we're excited that everyone out there is excited. This is an exciting time for US Figure Skating. Our Learn to Skate numbers are currently on track to be the best yet, and we're working on brand new bridge programming for all of our clubs, which we will roll out in several months. From the Program Development Committee, Excel and Excel Plus has been a work in progress for over 2 years. Between then and now, US Figure Skating and the PSA have held several webinars and gathered information from coaches all over the country in an effort to create a program that both coaches and athletes can find success with. The goal of this program is to keep bodies in the building, which helps coaches, clubs, and rinks, as well, of course, as our skaters. Let me turn this over to Elise and Mark so they can tell you more about Excel and all it has to offer.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Mark Weitzman. We are super excited to talk to you tonight about the Excel program. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the Excel program itself, a little bit about the series and the final, and then we will also touch on some basics of IJS as well. And obviously have a bunch of time for questions at the end. But just quickly, sort of the mission of the Excel program is to, as Patrick said, is to inspire more of our athletes to continue their training and continue their commitment to the sport by providing them with events at a level that allows them to showcase all their strengths. And we hope by doing this that we're able to inspire our athletes and challenge them and create excitement through the program. One of the other things we look to do with Excel is to create a bridge from the Learn to Skate USA program through US Figure Skating. As Patrick mentioned, Learn to Skate numbers are growing at a record pace, and one of our goals is to keep as many skaters involved in the sport for as long as we possibly can. And one other goal of the Excel program is to ease the transition for coaches, athletes, parents, clubs from the 6.0 system into IJS. So the Excel program has 3 components. So it's not just a name, right? First, we have created Excel free skate events, and they are just simply competitions that competition segments that will exist at any competitions, and they will be Excel levels from beginner through senior. In addition, we've created an Excel series that's running from March and then culminates in June with the National Festival.
So good evening, everyone. This is Elise Preston, and I just want to quickly thank everyone for joining in the call and for your interest in the Excel program. So the Excel Free Skate, as Mark was mentioning, are events that can be offered at any US Figure Skating sanctioned non-qualifying competition. So Excel events do not necessarily have to be in conjunction specifically with a series competition. These can be held at any competition locally that's sanctioned as a non-qualifying competition. Skaters, when they enter a competition, may not do both a well-balanced free skate and an Excel free skate at the same non-qualifying competition. They are, however, permitted to skate a well-balanced short program and Excel Free Skate at the same competition. The judging of Excel events at a competition that is not part of the series, it's completely at the discretion of the LOC, whether they use the 6.0 or IJS system for all of the levels. The LOCs are clearly stating the judging, the choice of what judging system will be used in their announcement. So you should get in the habit of looking for that in the announcements before you sign up your kids for different events. So just make sure that you're all on the same page with which judging system will be used. IJS Excel Free Skate events are not eligible right now for IJS protocol test credit. There are a few reasons for that. The program components are not equally compatible, and because this is a pilot season for this program, it's just something that's not being considered at the moment. That may change down the road, but for now and the foreseeable future, protocol from Excel events does not qualify for test credit. There are no age restrictions for Excel Free Skate events held at non-series competitions. However, within this series, skaters do need to be under 21 years old by the registration deadline, which for this year is March 1st. We've had some questions about why the skills that are the skills in the chart for pre-preliminary and preliminary are redundant, and so I'm going to walk you through sort of the pathways and the thinking behind how the levels were set up. So for skaters who may still be in the Learn to Skate, Free Skate 1 to 6 levels, or are working their way through learning basic figure skating, they may not be actually testing Learn to Skate, Free Skate 1 to 6, but they're still at a level that's below pre-preliminary. So we're just, for the purposes of this conversation, calling those introductory levels. They're non-tested levels, so those for beginner and high beginner go up through the loop jump. Then once kids have a flip and a Lutz, they would go to pre-preliminary in the standard track, and we kept that jump requirement of flip and Lutz consistent from pre-preliminary to preliminary, because we do have a group of skaters who have already tested perhaps all the way up through juvenile, and the highest jump that they have is an axel. So when we did the process of rethinking how to make this track more challenging, but also we didn't want to lose any skaters who were already in the system and had already taken tests. We wanted to make sure what we're trying to do is widen the competitive opportunities rather than change who this track might work for. So kids who their highest jump they may have at the moment is an axel, and maybe they've already tested through juvenile, their progression through the chart would be to go from pre-preliminary to preliminary to pre-juve to juve. Or if they already have taken their juvenile test, then they would start at juvenile. If you have a skater who gets their axel around the pre-preliminary or preliminary level, they could go straight into the plus track, and they would start at pre-preliminary or preliminary plus and then work their way up the levels to senior. There's no sort of rule about this. It's really giving coaches and empowering coaches and skaters to take what skills they have and what their current tested level is and find a place that sort of best matches their current skills, and then find a track within Excel that meets their development, as well as perhaps adding in well-balanced events through the season. So we also have been getting a number of questions about what Excel levels skaters are eligible for. So the skater level is determined purely by which free skate test has been passed, and moves in the field tests in no way determine or affect which event level you're eligible for. Skaters can compete at the level of their highest free skate test passed or one level above. So just to be super clear, we made a couple of examples because I know it's a little bit confusing with the plus levels. The plus levels are still considered a test level event. They're not considered a second sort of level. So as an example, if you haven't passed any free skate tests, you could be competing no test in the well-balanced track. In Excel, you could be competing in beginner, Excel high beginner, or Excel pre-preliminary. And Excel pre-preliminary would be considered skating one level above your test level. If you have passed your Learn to Skate USA Free Skate 4 test, then you could compete at Excel high beginner, or you could compete one level up to Excel pre-preliminary. Skaters who have passed their Free Skate 5 test and have not yet taken their pre-preliminary Free Skate test, they have only one level within Excel that they're eligible for, and that's the Excel pre-preliminary level. And again, if your skater has tested their preliminary free skate level, then a lot more options open up. They could compete in Excel Preliminary, Excel Preliminary Plus, Excel Pre-Juvenile, or Excel Pre-Juvenile Plus, and so on and so forth. So I think at the lower levels, it's a little bit more confusing, and as you work your way up the chart, it becomes a little bit more clear, but we wanted to give you specific examples here to hopefully clear some of that up. Also, because skaters who may have passed their Learn to Skate USA Free Skate 5 or Free Skate 6 test basically have to, if they're going to skate in Excel, they have to skate at Excel Pre-Preliminary. US Figure Skating has made it optional for skaters at the Excel Pre-Preliminary competition level. They either have to have their Learn to Skate USA membership or a full US Figure Skating membership in order to compete at Excel Pre-Preliminary. That's an exception we made recently that they agreed to, just so that the kids who have tested Free Skate 5 and 6 have a place to skate, because high beginner maxes out with kids who've taken their Free Skate 4 test. And this is just one page from the Excel program requirements chart. And basically, we've just highlighted where in the chart you'll find the information that I just gave you. So you'll see just below the top, it says that you can compete at your free skate test level or one level higher. And then along the left side for these lower levels where it's a little bit more confusing, we've clarified what your maximum test level is for each of those events.
Okay, so it's good practice to continue to check the element charts and the technical information for Excel on a regular basis. They can be found on usfs.org. Under the Programs tab, there is a submenu for Excel, and there you can find technical information. You can find the program requirements. You can also find information about the series and the final. So generally speaking, any changes that are made to program length or the number of required elements, those will align with any changes in well-balanced programs as well. And so they'll take, those changes will take place on the same date as any changes in well-balanced. So for example, this year, February 1st, which is Friday, the intermediate programs and the novice programs, the lengths will change, and in novice, the number of elements will change slightly. One thing we wanted to do as we created the Excel program is we wanted to make sure that we kept the program lengths and the number of required elements similar to well-balanced. One, to allow skaters to move freely back and forth between Excel and well-balanced throughout the season or at the end of a season or at various points. And then the other reason is that obviously we wanted to keep the programs the same length for testing so that skaters and coaches wouldn't have to create additional programs for the series. So as this is a pilot season, we do expect that modifications will be made after this first season, and then probably additionally over time as we deem them necessary. Many coaches, parents, skaters have already shared recommendations, and you know, this is not a dictatorship. We welcome your feedback. We welcome your opinions. Please email us, contact us with any ideas or suggestions. We totally welcome them. So just as I mentioned just quickly before, so just to highlight a couple of changes that are taking place this week in the well-balanced track and will also take place in the Excel track, that the intermediate programs will move from 240 plus or minus 10 to 3 minutes plus or minus 10. But none of the number of jumps or spins will change. In novice, both now moving forward, both novice ladies and novice men programs will be 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and the number of jump elements will be 7 for both ladies and men, with the spin requirement staying exactly the same, and the step sequence requirement as well.
So that brings us to the Excel series. Again, the series for this season is actually kicking off this weekend. Our first 2 competitions will be held this weekend, and we're running January through mid-May. And the series final, which will take place at the first National Festival, is going to be June 7th to 9th, and that's going to be in Coral Springs, Florida. So again, this is the pilot series of the Excel, the pilot season of the Excel series, and there are 2 different sort of levels of experience for the series. So for the skaters who are in any of the levels, beginner, high beginner, pre-preliminary, preliminary, pre-juve, and juvenile, the skaters have to register for the series through a link that's on the US Figure Skating website. You can again find that under the Programs tab on the US Figure Skating website and scrolling down to Excel Series. On that page, there's a little box in the upper right-hand corner, and there's a link to the online registration for the Excel Series. Skaters need to do that no later than March 1st if they want to be enrolled in the series, and that is a hard deadline, so you want to make sure if your skaters are interested in participating this season that they make it by that deadline, or if they plan on doing a competition that is taking place before March 1st, they do have to register for the series through the US Figure Skating website before that competition. So if they are doing the competition, for example, this weekend, you want to make sure that your registration is taken care of today or tomorrow before the competition starts. Otherwise, any points or placements that you make at that competition will not count towards your series participation. The skaters will register for and compete in at least 1 competition from the list of official Excel Series competitions. Again, that's for this group of skaters only. They can enter a series competition that's either in or outside of their home section. They do not have to enter only competitions that are in their section. If you happen to live closer to a competition that's happening that's outside your section, any of the competitions listed on the page will qualify you for this, for meeting this requirement. Skaters will receive an automatic invitation to compete in the Excel Series final at the National Festival from this for these levels in the series. And skaters may register online for the Excel Series final and the National Festival beginning in mid to late March. That announcement will be posted. Again, you'll find the link on the Excel Series page of the US Figure Skating website. I'm sure we'll send out a save the date, and we'll send out reminder emails once that announcement is available. Judging for these events, for these levels within the series at each competition, again, is up to the LOC. So you may see some series competitions where some or all of the levels from beginner through juvenile are being judged as either 6.0 or IJS. So again, make sure that you're checking out the competition announcement clearly before you head to the competition. And for the Excel Series final, the levels on this page will be judged as 6.0. So just so that you understand that going in. The highest ranking skaters in these levels will receive special recognition at the Excel Series final and also in Skating Magazine. For more information about how all this will work, you can reference the Excel Series handbook, which again is posted and downloadable from that website.
The second portion of the Excel series encompasses Preliminary Plus, Pre-Juvenile Plus, Juvenile Plus, and then Excel Intermediate through Senior. As Elise had mentioned before, it's possible that at competitions where Excel is offered, these levels could be offered as IJS or 6.0. But for all the series competitions and for the final, they will be judged under IJS. Just like the other levels, skaters register for the series through the US Figure Skating website by March 1st or before their first series competition. For these levels, skaters must register and compete in at least 2 competitions from the list. And again, just as in the other levels, skaters can compete inside or outside of their home section. It doesn't matter. Skaters can also elect to compete in more than 2. That's fine as well. And in which case, we'll just take their 2 highest protocol scores, and those will be combined for a total series score. At that point, the top 6 scoring skaters at each level within each section will receive an invitation to the Excel Series Finalist Camp, the Excel Series Final, and the National Festival. So there should, in theory, there should be about a total of 18 skaters in the country competing in the final at each of these levels. So 6 from the East, 6 from the Midwest, and 6 from the West. If your skater qualifies, invitations will be sent out via email as soon as possible. I think our last competitions finish in early May, so immediately following that last competition, invitations will be sent out, and skaters will have about a week to register for the final. In addition to the competition at the final, there'll be a camp which will help skaters maximize their performance quality and program components. There'll be off-ice components as well. This slide shows a list of all of the competitions in our pilot series, in our pilot season for Excel. The few competitions that are highlighted in yellow are competitions that have recently been added that you may want to take note of. There's competitions added in all 3 sections recently. And obviously, going forward, we hope to encourage more clubs and more LLCs to take part in the series, particularly in the East and the West. You know, as this is a new program, we certainly welcome all clubs and all competitions to submit an application to be part of the series for our next season.
Which brings us to the National Festival. So one of the goals, or the main goal of the National Festival, is really to create an event that will help inspire our kids and skaters who are in the Learn to Skate and in the grassroots levels of figure skating, and help bridge them into full US figure skating membership and sort of pull them in and get them excited to remain in the sport and keep competing. And so how we're trying to do that through the National Festival is to bring all the levels of skaters together under one roof, again, to inspire those younger skaters, introduce them to a fun and yet challenging competitive experience where they can see what the next level of commitment in the sport looks like. And it looks challenging, but it also looks attainable. So this is why we have sort of a tiered level of involvement for this. And we've been getting a number of questions about why the beginner through juvenile levels are sort of held as open events at the series final, and versus the plus levels through senior, and why they have to sort of qualify to get there. And again, it is to bring in that level of understanding that, you know, in the beginning it's open. In Compete USA, we want all of the youngest kids who are just first starting out, we limit the groups to 4 and everybody gets a medal, and it's a very inclusive and open experience, and everybody is having a great time. But it is a competitive sport, and we do want kids to sort of experience, and kids do want to experience that like sort of next level of involvement and commitment. So we move from that to kids skaters needing to register for one competition, and that's what gets them to the Excel Series final of the National Festival. And then the final level where the kids are, training a little bit more, and they're more involved in the sport, and they're very committed, and that's where the challenge levels come in. So again, save the date for the National Festival. It's being held again June 7th to 9 in Coral Springs, Florida. Again, depending upon the what level and event the children are skating in or the skaters are skating in, there are it's open for all Compete USA levels. Will be holding events from Snowplow Sam up to Free Skate 6, and then all of the Excel levels. There will be competitors at the National Festival. The skaters will all have a competition day, and they'll have a day that is considered their festival day. So on their festival day, the skaters will have a social event. We're going to have all the skaters assigned before they arrive at the event to either the red, white, or blue team, and there will be team building experiences while they're at the event for the weekend. There'll be meet and greets with Team USA athletes who'll be visiting, and also team paired up with the red, white, and blue teams. There'll be off-ice performance classes. We'll have parents forums, and there'll be, for the Excel sectional finalists, the skaters who effectively qualify to get there, they'll be giving an exhibition on the day that the Compete USA kids are skating their events. Ta-da! Sorry, I had to do that just once. So here we are with the Excel National Festival and the Compete USA National Festival. It's the same event. It's slightly different experiences for the kids in the Excel track and the Compete USA track, simply in that what they're doing on each day will be slightly different. So a tentative schedule, and again, depending on how many participants we have by levels, we'll have to work out the schedule. It may tweak somewhat, but the basic tentative schedule plan for right now is that Friday will be the Excel finalists performance camp. There'll also be practice ice available for the Excel skaters on Friday, and that's for the plus levels through and intermediate through senior. On Saturday, the Excel all levels will be competing, or one day they'll be competing, and it will be the festival day for the Compete USA competitors. And then the last day, Sunday, will be the Compete USA competition, and then the festival day for the Excel competitors, along with the finalists exhibition. So again, here's just a resource page with links to the various resources we mentioned during the webinar. I encourage you to check them all out. Also, if you have any questions, we've been getting a lot of questions and we welcome them. So please do feel free to email us. You can copy all 3 of us, and we'll get those right back to you.
And we have had some questions come in during, oh, sorry.
Great.
We have had some questions come in, so I'll go ahead and start diving into those. So the first one is Excel only for skaters under the age of 21?
So the Excel events at anybody, regardless of age, can compete in an Excel event at a non-qualifying competition. To participate in the Excel series, the cutoff is age 21. They have to be under 21 by as of March 1st.
Thanks. And then another one is, whoops, sorry, I had more come in. So is the Excel track meant to replace the free skate 1 through 6 events at competitions, or should we expect to see both? Different
parts of the country really utilize the the different various competitive options. So in some parts of the country, free skate 1 to 6 events are very popular. In other parts of the country, historically, skaters have waited and gone straight to no test. Sometimes this is also a coaching choice. So you will still see both events offered. Some competitions, just because they know what the coaches and skaters there typically use, may offer some of them more than others. So it's not intended as a replacement at all. I think you will still see both events, and often both happening at the same competition. I know the local competition we are having at our rink coming up, we're doing Excel levels, I think, up through novice, from beginner through novice, and we're doing all of the Learn to Skate USA up through Free Skate 6 as well.
And then another one is, will Preliminary Plus be held at Compete USA events?
Compete USA events are able to offer Excel Beginner, Excel High Beginner, Excel Pre-Preliminary, Excel Preliminary, and Excel Preliminary Plus.
Okay, and then some other questions that have been coming in, I'll address a couple really quick. So slides will be sent out after this, and then we'll also post the webinar online so you can review it. So don't worry about trying to capture all of the information that's presented, because it will go out again. And then another one that's come in a couple of times has been, is the deadline to register for the Excel series March 1st or by the competition entry deadline of a series event, or prior to the competition? Elise, I don't know if you want to speak to this one, but I can also answer it.
Yeah, you can go ahead. I believe we said that it's by the start of the competition.
Yeah.
Or March 1st, whichever is first.
Yeah, just because for this first year, a lot of skaters are learning about the program as it gets rolled out, and so we don't want to limit anybody's opportunities to compete because they missed it by the entry deadline for the competition. So prior to actually stepping on the ice to compete in a series event, you have to be registered. And then another one that has come in a little bit is whether or not you can use an Excel event as test credit, use the protocol for test credit. And right now you cannot do that. That's only for standard or well balanced. At this point, we don't quite have the capability to do it yet for Excel, but that's definitely something we're looking at in the future. And then moving on to the question specific to the series and then the national festival is, how many do you have to place in top 3 for 2 competitions in order to be invited?
So I can answer that. So it's not necessarily that you have to finish in the top 3. So for the Excel Preliminary Plus, all the Plus events, and then Excel Intermediate through Senior, you have to compete in at least 2 competitions, and then we will take your 2 highest scores, or 2 scores if you choose to do 2 competitions, and we will add those 2 scores together. And then the highest 6 finishers from each section will qualify for the national festival. So it really just depends on what your scores are. And in theory, you could finish 4th in one competition, 1st in another competition, and still end up cumulatively with one of the highest 6 scores in your section. So it's just a matter of what the aggregate of your scores is, and not necessarily your placement at each event.
Great, thank you. And then I had another one come in. Let me find it. Another one that just came in is, if all 6 qualifiers don't register, will we invite the next skaters in line to compete at the final? Right.
We will fill up, if there are open spots in one section, we will use the next in line to fill up those spots, yes.
Okay. And then another one is, why is the National Festival limited in number of qualifiers at the highest level, where skaters are at a higher risk of leaving the sport?
Again, we're trying to offer a tiered experience, that figure skating involvement in the sport as you remain committed and as you work your way up the levels does become more challenging, but also the reward for that goes up as well. So I think that skaters who are committed on that level, they really are sort of yearning for a desire to feel like they're competing against other kids and they're earning an opportunity to move on, and that at the higher levels is more meaningful to the kids who put that work in than at the lower levels. So it really is sort of following the model that as they are becoming more competitive and committed to the sport, that is part of the experience. And then the experience at the National Festival for that group of skaters will also be sort of a wider experience as well.
Great. And then to transition a little bit over to the LOC side, because I know we have a lot of club people on the line as well. Can you discuss the requirements for LOCs in terms of officials needed for the events, and if that differs for series events versus any non-qualifying competition that's offering Excel events?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So there really aren't too many differences in terms of judges. You can use any judges that you can use at a regular non-qualifying competition. They can be used at Excel events at a non-qualifying competition or as series events. The only real difference is that for the series competitions, for the plus events and then intermediate through senior, they'll be scored under IJS. So you'll need also a technical panel, which we'll start getting into momentarily. But you'll need a tech panel to in addition to the judging panel at the series events.
Great, thanks. And then another one for on the LOC side is, are we looking for only to keep this always a January to May event, or is there potential to open it up? And what do you anticipate the timeline being to apply for 2020?
So the calendar is always challenging. That there is really no great time for everyone across the country to hold an event like this. We did look at a number of different dates, and we played around with different potential dates for the season. It's certainly a possibility that that season might shift as we receive feedback throughout the season, but that also has to align with the current US figure skating calendar and what other events they're pulling off, in certain months. So the time frame is there's a lot of challenging bits that go into that. We chose this season, one, because it did work with the US figure skating calendar, and also because we're putting Compete USA under the same umbrella event at the National Festival. We thought that a sort of end of skating season for many skaters experience would be a nice way to wrap up their year. So there are a lot of skaters who skate through the winter and then may take the summer off to go to summer camp or do other things. And so we thought it would be sort of a culminating event from that perspective. Again, that being said, the season certainly could shift. It could change dramatically. It could shift a little bit, and that's something we will look at the conclusion of this season as we receive feedback about it.
Yeah, I think, and just to dovetail on what Elise said, I think one of the other reasons we looked at having the final for this season wrap up in June was because we do anticipate a number of skaters at the juvenile levels and above probably going on and competing in regionals. So we did want to leave them the time and opportunity to compete a little bit at the well-balanced track and potentially compete at regionals if they choose to do so.
And as far as when we will start accepting applications for competitions that are interested in hosting next year, typically those invitations or inquiries are put out about 2 to 4 weeks at the conclusion of the series. So my best sort of hunch would be sort of mid-summer to start looking on the Youth Figure Skating website. And Carissa, I believe, sends out an email to someone with each club. Do you typically send it to club presidents or?
Yeah, typically an email will go to club presidents. So if you know that you're interested in hosting in 2020, just go ahead and send me an email now, and I'll add your email as well to the contact list to make sure you're notified when it's available. So we're going to go ahead and move on from this portion of the webinar and dive a little bit more into the technical details. I know there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered that have come in, but rest assured we are seeing all of those, and then we will send out answers to these questions after the webinar as well, and I'll follow up with you as well to make sure that all your questions get answered. So, and you all have my email to continue sending in questions along. So if you're on the club side, or you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of the technical requirements for Excel, feel free to go ahead and exit the webinar now if you want. We won't hold it against you. But if you want more information on the technical requirements, we'll go ahead and start that.
Thanks, Carissa. So as we've mentioned before, that in all the series events and some non-qualifying competitions as well, IJS will be utilized for Excel. And I think one of the main benefits of IJS for skaters is that they'll receive a protocol following each competition, it's kind of like a report card, and it'll help you understand your strengths and your areas that could be improved in your skating. I know myself, when I skated under 6.0, right, if you get a 4.2, how do you get a 4.4? Who knows? But with IJS, you see the protocol right in front of you, and you can see where you could improve for the next event. One of the other benefits and reasons that we are utilizing IJS in the Excel events is that we're hoping that it can provide a smoother transition into IJS. With Learn to Skate numbers increasing so rapidly, and IJS moving down through the lower levels, we thought this would serve as a great segue into the system. And as we'll talk about going forward, a few of the things we've done to ease the transition is that we're using choreographic step sequences as opposed to leveled step sequences, and that we are restricting spin levels at the lower levels to encourage more basic spinning positions. So with that in mind, I want to turn this over to Elliot Schwartz, who is the Vice Chair for Tectonic Education and all-around expert in IJS, and he's going to walk us through some of the basics.
Thanks so much for the nice intro, Mark. And hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the call today. Let's see. So, yeah, the slide is advancing. I'm in Kalamazoo right now, and it's freezing cold here. And I don't know if that's freezing my internet connection, but I'm a little bit behind. So the first slide just concerns, so Mark mentioned that and Elise mentioned that IJS is being used at all the Excel series competitions. So, and Mark mentioned that means in addition to judges, you also have to have a technical panel. So the technical panel consists of either 3 or 5 officials. So at competitions that are using the full computerized mini system with the touch screens, there will be 5 officials, but there are 3 decision makers. And the one in the middle is the technical specialist. That person is someone with an extensive skating and or coaching background, and they're what's known as the caller. So they're the person who is watching the skater on the ice and calling out the jumps and the spins and the step sequences as they're happening. The assistant technical specialist is someone with the same qualifications, but they're taking notes on everything, and they can call for a review if they think something needs to be looked at again or they don't agree with the specialist's call. And finally, the controller on the panel, that's someone who has a judging appointment, and their primary role is to make sure rules are followed, and they are the leader in the review process. And then finally, for a competition with a computerized system, there's a data operator who's I call it, that's one job that Mark and I both do. I call it my McDonald's job because I'm sitting at a touch screen and I'm entering the calls that the specialist is making, and I'm playing back the video in the review process if we want to review any calls. And then finally, the video replay operator. That's not the person operating the camera. They're just tagging the beginning and the end of the element clips so that the data operator can find them easily. Okay. Chris, have you advanced to the next slide? Or Elise?
Yes, we're on the slide that says IJS, the marks all add up.
Great, super, I can see that now, thank you. So IGS, and what I tell everybody is, so IGS is about scoring points, and it's about, in terms of a competition, it's about accumulating as many points as you can while the music is playing. So think of it in that way as a little bit of a game. So the ways to earn points are, so there's what we call a scale of values. So basically, the International Skating Union has a scale of values that dictates how many points each type of element is worth based on its relative difficulty. So a single axle is worth more than a single Lutz, and a double axle is worth more than a single axle. So there's a whole scale of values. It's available on US Figure Skating's website, and the technical panel determines, that they call the jumps that are performed, whether they're fully rotated or not, and they're also calling the levels on the spins. The other way to earn points is from positive GOEs. GOE is an acronym standing for grades of execution. So it's basically the quality of everything that's performed. So the judges aren't worrying about the difficulty of the elements, they're purely assessing the grade of execution, how well it's done. And positive grades of execution also add to the skater's score. And then finally, program components is the other way. So those are the so-called artistic marks. And the ones that are being used in the Excel program are skating skills, presentation, and interpretation. Now, there's also ways to lose points. That would be from any negative grades of execution for elements that have errors in them. Falls also subtract from the overall score and also negatively impact the grade of execution. And then finally, any other deductions from the referee, such as a timing deduction or a costume deduction, would also subtract from the overall score. Okay, so as I mentioned, IGS is all about accumulating as many points as possible while the music is playing. And I mentioned that scale of values, and I've just shown part of it on the right-hand side. Don't let it scare you. It makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just phone a friend, ask them to talk you through it. But basically on the left-hand side, you can see various element codes, and I'll talk a little bit about what those codes mean. And then in the middle, in the boldface, is the base value of the element. That's what I mentioned earlier. That's based on the difficulty of the element. And then you can see columns for +1 through +5 on the right-hand side and -1 through -5 on the left-hand side. Basically, the grades of execution, for every positive you earn, it's an extra 10% of the base value that you get in points. And for every negative GOE, it subtracts 10%, with a maximum upside of +50% and a maximum downside of -50%. You can see there are some codes that have like less than signs following them. Those indicate under-rotated jumps, so that's a jump that's either a quarter of a turn or more short, but not as much as half a turn short. And if it's half of a rotation short, then it's called downgraded, and that jump would earn the base value of the jump with one less rotation. In terms of the fall deductions, for Excel beginner, high beginner, and pre-preliminary, it's -1/4 point, and for all the other Excel levels, it's -0.5 point. Okay, so in terms of establishing GOEs, really quick hit. So the judges basically look for aspects of the elements that are positive, and there's a published list of those positive bullets that we're looking for, and then the judge subtracts from that GOE according to guidelines for any possible errors that occur. Okay, and then I mentioned program components are a really important way to gain points, and I think it'll be especially important for our Excel series skaters. So the emphasis is on skating skills, performance, and interpretation. So there are lots of definitions and criteria for each of these, but in short, skating skills is basically about your balance and speed on the blade. So it's how clean and sure your edges are, your flow across the ice, your command of what we call the skating vocabulary, that's edges, steps, and turns, and using effortless power to accelerate and vary your speed. It's how well you skate on one foot, can you skate in multiple directions, etc. Performance, the buzzword there is delivery. So it's how involved is the skater physically, emotionally, and intellectually as they deliver the intent of the music and the composition. So it includes things like projection, which is like reaching out to the crowd, the quality of your carriage or your posture, the variety of the movements, displaying individuality and personality. And then finally, an interpretation, that's all about feeling. So it's all about movement to the music. And it's skating in time to the music. It's expressing the character of the music with the body. It can also be facial expressions, but we don't want it to be solely that. And it's also expression of the details and the nuances of the music. Okay. All right. So for jumps, every jump has a particular code, and then you may see things on the protocol sheet that result in a lesser value. So there may be, at each level, there are certain repeat rules, we call them, for doing jumps. So for each level, there may be certain jumps where if it's performed twice, at least one of them has to be in combination or sequence. If one of those restricted jumps is performed twice as a solo jump, then something plus rep will appear on the second jump, and that reduces the base value to 70%. We don't have short program in Excel, so we don't have to worry about the plus combo. And then if the skater opts to do jumps as a sequence, the base values of those are added together and then multiplied by 80%. Okay, let's advance to the next slide, please. Okay, some other things about jumps. So I mentioned that the technical panel is evaluating whether the jumps are fully rotated and also whether they're cleanly done. So for flips and lutzes, we expect them to be on the correct edge. So there's a symbol called E, which is basically that the wrong edge is the takeoff edge, and then an exclamation point is used if the takeoff edge is not clear, or what we would call a flat. A single less than sign indicates that the jump is designated as under-rotated, and that's a missing rotation of a quarter revolution or more, but less than half a revolution. And then the two less than signs indicate a downgraded jump, and that would be missing rotation of half a revolution or more. It could also include a jump with an improper takeoff, such as the toe axle, where the skater turns on the toe and ends up taking off going forward in what's meant to be a toe loop jump. Okay, so in IJS we talk about spins and spin positions and character of spin. So I'm going to talk to all of those aspects. So the first thing that's important for all of you to know is just the definition of basic positions. So the first one is a camel position, and the definition there, and hopefully the photo is helpful, is where the free leg is backward and the knee is higher than the hip level. A sit position is where the upper part of the skating leg is at least parallel to the ice. So one of the things that you'll realize about IJS is there's a lot of emphasis on these basic positions. An upright position is defined as any position where the skating leg is extended or slightly bent, but it's not a camel position. The free leg is not backward. So those are the three basic positions that's really important for you as coaches to know. Okay, and then in IJS, in order to achieve higher levels than base level, there are what we call difficult variations that are ways of obtaining higher levels. So I'm going to address some of those now. Hopefully this will be a helpful reference for you later. The difficult variations in the camel position are based on the direction of the shoulder line. So you can see on the photo at the left, the shoulders are lined up parallel to the ice, and so that's considered a camel forward. A camel sideways is where the shoulders are lined up one above the other or stacked, and that's called a camel side or camel sideways. And then finally, what a lot of people refer to as a layover, where the skater is turned over, and again, the shoulders are pretty much lined up parallel. That's referred to as a camel up or a camel upward. Okay, and then in terms of the sit positions, the difficult variations of the sit are based on the position of the free leg. So if the free leg is in front of the skater, it's referred to as a sit forward. And you can see all these photos are different types of sit forward. So the skaters can get very creative. And then the two at the top are referred to as a sit sideways or a sit side. So that's one where literally the free leg is to the side of the skater. And then what we refer to as the sit behind is where the free leg is behind the skater. And you can see there are even some different varieties of that. And then finally, in the upright position, it's based on the position of the torso. So what people refer to as the A-frame is where the torso is forward, so that's called an upright forward. And then on the right side, you can see three photos that illustrate different versions of upright straight. So the torso is straight, but you can see various versions of difficult variations. And then we also have a Biellmann, so it's referred to as an upright Biellmann. That's where the leg is pulled toward above the head toward the skating axis. And then you can see different versions of an upright layback, where there's clearly an arch in the back, and the skater is in a difficult position. So all these difficult positions are positions that require significant strength and or flexibility. Here's a non-basic position. So non-basic just means it's not in either a camel, a sit, or an upright. It's only possible to be achieved in a combination spin or a combination spin with a change of foot, or either one of those with a flying entry. And you can see some different versions of a difficult position there, again, requiring significant strength and or flexibility. Okay, so here's straight from the rule book. So if you want to go read this later, it's rule 6103E in the rule book. So different character in spins refers to each of the spins that are performed has a different code or abbreviation, or some people call it nature. And there are various guidelines here. I think it would be difficult to read through all these now, but different character refers to whether it's a spin in one position, or what position that is, or if it's a combination spin, whether the spin changes foot, and or whether the spin has a flying entry. All right, you can go on. Yeah, okay, and yeah, here's some more details about the codes. So yeah, an upright spin, so a spin every spin ends in SP, capital S, lowercase p. For the spins in one position, we have an upright spin. A layback spin is a version of an upright spin, but it has its own code. It's LSP. Sit spin is SSP, and camel spin is CSP. If it's a combination spin, meaning at least two basic positions, then it's called a COSP. And then a C preceding the code indicates a spin with a change of foot. So an example here is a camel spin with a change of foot. You'd put a C in front of the CSP. And if it has a flying entry, you could have something like a flying camel spin where the F would go before the CSP. You could also have a flying change foot camel spin, and there you'd put the S in front of the CCSP you see there. You can also have F or C before the combination spin, or before any of the other one position spins. Okay, so here's another example. So let's say you have a spin that consists of a camel position, a sit forward, difficult variation, and a change of feet, and then it's in an upright position. That would be a combination spin because it has two or more basic positions. So you have a COSP, you put a C in front of it, and then because of the sit forward variation, it achieves a level 1. Here's an example of a flying entrance, and then different types of camel positions. So that would be a flying camel spin, FCSP. A camel upward variation held for at least 2 revolutions would be awarded a level, and then same thing for a camel sideways held for at least 2 revolutions in position would receive a level. So that would be an example of a flying camel spin level 2 or an FCSP 2. Here's another example with a combination spin with a change of foot and a flying entrance. So if the skater were to execute a sit side, but only for 1.5 revolutions, that would not be awarded a difficult variation. But if the flying entrance is difficult, meaning the skater achieved significant air in their fly, achieved the basic position in the air, and achieved the basic position within 2 revolutions of landing, that would also be awarded a feature or a level. And then the slash indicates the change of foot. A basic camel position is required in a combination spin to get credit for all 3 basic positions. And then finally, sit backwards for 2 revolutions would get a level, and an upright. So if the skater has all 3 basic positions on the second foot, that also gets a level. So here, there's 1 level for the difficult fly, 1 level for the sit behind, and a 3rd level for achieving all 3 basics from the second foot for an FCC OSP3. And then finally, nice simple spin. If the skater achieves at least 3 revolutions in total, in this case they have 4, and holds the basic position in a sit for 2 revolutions, then that would be a sit spin level base. So B indicates the level base. Okay, the choreographic step sequence. So all levels in Excel are using the choreographic step that's not leveled. So the key thing here is that there's no required pattern, but the step sequence has to fully utilize the ice surface. It must be visible and easily identifiable. And some examples of utilizing the whole ice surface are a straight line from short barrier to short barrier. It could be a serpentine pattern across the ice. It could be a circle as long as the circle fills out the ice pretty well. An oval, same idea, or some sort of similar shape. So this is the only criterion that exists for the skater to be awarded the choreographic step sequence. Otherwise, the skater will have no value. Listed jumps can be included and will be called by the tech panel.
Elliot, a question.
Okay, go ahead.
A question that we had gotten on step sequences was, what is the difference between a step sequence versus a choreo sequence versus a choreo step?
Actually, I'm going to let Mark take that one. Mark's a technical specialist. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so the choreo sequence is only used in senior programs, and it is any number of free skating moves, more than 1 though, that match the music. It could be steps. It could also be things like spirals and Ina Bowers and spread eagles and other kind of movements. The choreographic step sequence is what is being used at all of the Excel levels, as well as in juvenile and below well balanced. And so they generally are a sequence of steps, turns, other free skating movements that have some features that are being identified by the judges for positive or negative grades of executions, but they're not being given a level. So they're just identified as complete or not complete, as Elliot mentioned. So the judges are looking for a nice quality of turns, whether the step matches the music, and things like that, but there are no requirements for the number of types of turns or steps in those sequences. An actual step sequence, which is used in intermediate through senior well-balanced events in short programs and free skates, those step sequences are not only identified by the tech panel, but they're also assessed a level. And the levels are awarded based on the number of turns and steps and body movements and directions and things like that.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mark. So now I'm going to briefly address, so Mark and Elise mentioned the IJS protocol, and it's one of the most, I think, the greatest things about IJS because it really gives you a lot of valuable feedback and really can help you and you and your skater understand how the skater is improving and identify how you're making progress. So in the technical score, each element, as I mentioned, has a base value, and that's based on the difficulty. Then on the protocol, you also see the grade of execution from each of the judges and how many points that translates to in terms of bumping up or lowering the skater's overall score. And then the sum of the point values from all of the base value of all the elements and all of the GOE points is what's known as the total element score. And then finally, the program component score is calculated and factored by different percentages based on the level. And again, those program components are skating skills, performance, and interpretation. Okay, so here's an example protocol. I pulled this. This is from, this happens to be a juvenile skater, but it was convenient, so I grabbed it. So here you can see on the left-hand side, you've got different codes for all the elements. So we looked at some SPID codes before. You can see this particular skater, Sam, had a combination spin with a change of foot, CCOSP, and achieved a level 4. So level 4 won't be attainable at all Excel levels, but at the highest levels, it will be possible. Then 2LZ is a jump code for a double Lutz, 1A single axel, then we have double flip, the choreo step sequence that we talked about. The plus indicates it connects jumps in a combination. So we have a double Lutz, double loop combination, a double flip, double loop combination, and then finally a flying sit spin that also achieves a level 4. The next column, base value, again, that's based on the ISU scale of values. The X's indicate jumps executed in the second half. So for certain levels of the Excel program, skaters will be awarded a bonus for up to 3 jump elements performed in the second half of the program. The GOE column shows the point conversion for the GOE that the skater received. You can see on this panel, you can see which GOE each of the judges awarded. And then on the right-hand side, you can see, based on the sum of the base value and the GOE points, how many points the skater earned for each element, all totaling up to a total element score. And then on the bottom, at this particular time, juvenile still had 5 component marks with different weightings than they have now, but it just gives you an idea of what the protocol looks like. So if Elise or Chris, if you can click through, I think I've got some things indicated on the slide. Yeah, great. So again, upper left are the technical panel calls with the element codes, and you can see the base values. Go ahead and click again, please. Right, so these are the judges' GOEs. Go ahead. Right, and then the high and the low GOE are eliminated, and the rest of them are converted to points, and then the average of those is shown in the GOE column. And then click again, yeah, thank you. And then again, you can see each judge awards the program component scores. Again, the high and the low is taken, and using the factor, you get a total factored component score at the bottom. Go ahead and click one more time, great. So trim mean, and then any deductions that are taken would appear at the bottom. Okay, so as coaches, I mentioned that IJS is really a risk versus reward system. So it's really important to consider the different elements, understand what they're worth, really assess your skaters' abilities, and I think it's important to set short-term and long-term goals throughout the season. So you really want to be thinking about developing your skater, and you might want to try some higher risk elements at some of the competitions earlier in the season, or maybe even outside the series, and then, or maybe inside the series, and then really understand, okay, what are the long-term goals? What's the most important competitions you're building up toward, where you really want to maximize the skater's score? It's important to really evaluate the program as a whole. Is the package complete? And one of the things I see very often is that skaters are attempting a lot more difficulty than they're capable of, and it causes a negative impact on the GOEs as well as the program components. So you really have to weigh what's the right amount of difficulty and what's the right amount of quality and program components to really be going after for the skater. Okay, So some IJS resources. There's a lot of information on the US Figure Skating website. So you can go to the technical info tab on the right-hand side. You can go to, and then there's the information under singles that has the scale of values, that has all the positive bullets the judges are looking for. It has an explanation of the levels of difficulty, the features that the tech panel is looking for. The US Figure Skating Rulebook is a great source, like the rule I mentioned earlier. And then under the Program tab, Excel Series, if you look at the left-hand menu, there's some great Excel program technical info.
Thank you so much, Elliot. That was super helpful, and we're all aware that the first time people are exposed and hear all this information about IJS, it can seem overwhelming. Our goal here today was to sort of give everyone some basic familiarity, and Elliot, you did a wonderful job, so we thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. There will be more questions, especially with skaters and coaches and parents who may be less familiar with IJS. And again, some of this seems incredibly technical, but you want to keep in mind that especially with the spins and trying to achieve levels, we've limited the where you can start getting or earning higher levels of spins in Excel. There were really two reasons for that. One is because the jumps are more restricted in this track. We wanted to balance the weight of the programs a little bit more so that spins wouldn't be far outweighing everything else in the program. And secondly, because we do know that that's where a lot of the confusion there and the step sequence and how do we achieve levels comes in when coaches are first starting to bring skaters into the IJS system. So I know this might seem a little bit overwhelming. We did want to walk everyone through a protocol so that you know what you're looking at when you go to your first competition, if it's the first time that you're seeing that. And if you get confused by the codes, there's resources on the US Figure Skating website to help you find that. We can put a link to that also on the Excel page if that would be helpful. But our goal here wasn't to overwhelm anyone today, so we apologize, but we did want to make sure that everyone had sort of the basic information to help you ease that transition.
And then we have had a couple of questions come in, so I'll go ahead and read a couple of those. So one is, could you clarify, for a spin in one position, is it allowed to finish with an upright?
So the answer to that is yes. So if you, for example, choose to do a sit spin as your spin in one position, if you come up and do like a scratch spin at the end of it, that is totally acceptable, and it will still be called a sit spin as long as you don't start trying to add difficult variations when you do the concluding wind up at the end. So if you did like a sit spin or a camel spin or anything like that, and you come up and you do, a final wind up or, scratch spin as we used to call it, that's totally fine, and it would still be called the sit spin.
Great, thanks. And then will there still be leveled step sequences in IJS Excel?
The answer to that is no. So the way we have set up Excel is that at all levels, whether or not they use IJS, they will be marked as a choreo step sequence, and there are no leveled steps at all in the Excel program.
And then going back to spins, if it is a sit spin into a tuck, is that still a spin in one position?
So the positions are defined as I think Elliot sort of mentioned a little bit earlier. There are some criteria that define what position the spin is in. So regardless if you're in a sit forward or, as just to use sort of the street language, if you use, like if you did a cannonball or a pancake or a clam or a broken leg sit or any of those, as long as the upper part of your leg is at least parallel or beyond that to the ice, it would still be classified as a sit spin. So regardless of what difficult variation you're in, as long as that upper part of your leg remains parallel to the ice, it's still a sit spin.
Okay, thanks. That is, right now, that's all of the IJS specific questions I've had come in. So we'll just hang out for another minute or two and see if any others come in.
Chris, it's Patrick. Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
I just want to say to the coaches on this call, if you have significant experience with IJS, listening to Elliot was probably very helpful and easy. If you have very little experience with IJS, listening to Elliot might have scared you a little bit. And I want to reassure all of you that first and foremost, there are plenty of webinars that we've already done that help explain the basics of IJS, the very simple basics of IJS. And secondly, I want to assure you that we will be doing more of those webinars in the future. So for the truly grassroots coach that has not had much experience putting together a program, keep in mind that you're going to teach the same way you already teach. You're going to teach great skating skills, you're going to teach great sit spins, you're going to teach great camel spins, and from there, you're going to be able to create more opportunities for your skaters to create more point opportunities for your athletes. So please don't be afraid of IJS. If you can read the English language, you can understand IJS. There are lots of us out there that can help. All of you who maybe are struggling with some of the verbiage, there are plenty of us that can help you get through that. So please don't let that throw you.
Great.
Thanks, Patrick. And just to sort of piggyback a little bit on what Patrick said, also with the technical handbook that we wrote that accompanies the Excel program, we also tried to make it at the lower levels through preliminary. We tried to one, as Elise mentioned, restrict the levels on the spin so it doesn't get too crazy and too difficult. But also, we've made it very difficult for the skaters to end up receiving no value on the spins. So, I wouldn't panic about anything. Pretty much at all of those lower levels, your skaters will still receive value and then a grade of execution on all the spins.
Speaking of spins, a question that came in is, could you clarify the difference between character and position for spins, and which spins meet the requirements at pre, and preliminary levels?
Sure. Thanks for that question. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So just kind of, maybe I'll answer sort of the second part first. So at the pre-preliminary level, the programs have two spins, and one must be a single position spin, and the other one can be basically anything. It can be another single position spin. It can change. It could be it could change feet. It could change position. So what that means is that one spin has to just be either a plain sit spin, a plain camel spin, a plain upright or layback spin. Obviously, they could include some of the difficult variations Elliot mentioned, but they don't have to. And then the other spin can be essentially anything. It could be a change sit. It could be a combination spin. It could be a combination spin that changes feet. You have pretty much carte blanche on the other spin. The only thing the other spin can't be is the same exact spin as the spin in one position. And that's basically the same for Excel preliminary and Excel pre-preliminary, as well as the Excel preliminary plus. So, as long as you're not repeating the same exact spin, you can pretty much do what you want. I think you know, oftentimes at those levels, you know, obviously you have to design a program for your skater. Oftentimes at those levels, we do see the spin in one position, and then the other spin is some type of a combination spin. But you know, again, it doesn't have to be. And what was the beginning part of the question, Carissa?
The difference between character and position.
Sure. So the positions are defined as essentially either a camel, a sit, or an upright. The character of a spin is basically if the event is being scored under IJS, would be what code that spin is assigned. So I think as Elliot mentioned, like a sit spin, for example, would be SSP. So you couldn't have two sit spins, you couldn't have two SSP codes in your program. But if you did a sit spin and then you did, let's just say for argument's sake, a camel sit back scratch at those levels, then you'd have a sit spin, SSP, and then you would have a change foot combination spin, or CCOSP. And those, the characters are essentially the codes of those spins.
Thanks. And then another question related to the levels on spins is, could you just overview what the maximum levels are per level? And then is there a deduction if spins go to a higher level than is allowed?
Sure. That's another great question. Okay, so for the Excel pre-preliminary, preliminary, pre-juvenile, and then the corresponding pluses through pre-juvenile, the spins all are a maximum of level 1. At intermediate, the spins max at at juvenile and intermediate, the spins max at level 2. At novice, the spins will max out at level 3. And then for junior and senior, they will max out at level 4.
And not to cut you off, just to interject there, I think it's important that everyone knows that you can find all of that information in the Excel technical handbook. So if the question's coming in, it probably means people don't realize where they can find it. And more details about each of those are there as well. But go ahead and continue, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Elise, for mentioning that. So again, there's no penalty for trying to achieve more than the maximum level of features. And so, in fact, let's just use the juvenile, for example. So they max out at a level 2. If you tried to achieve 3 features, if you achieved all of them, you would still max out at a level 2. If you tried 3 different features and achieved 2 of them, you would still receive a level 2. And if you achieved any of the 2 features, you would receive a level 2. So it's not necessarily, it's not the first 2 attempt, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and then just another kind of follow-up question is, can you explain the best way to figure out the levels in the different spins?
Sure. So one thing that you might want to try to do is, if you go to the US Figure Skating website under technical info, there's another submenu for singles and pairs, and in there you can find a bunch of resources, one of which will outline all the different features you can use to achieve different levels in your spins. But you know, during the presentation, if you have a chance to go back through it, some of the slides that Elliot went through showing some of the different spin variations, if you would achieve one of those difficult spin variations for at least 2 revolutions, each one of those would bump up your spin by 1 level.
Thanks. And then just waiting to see, will you be able to hold a position for 8 revolutions more than 1 time in a program to receive a level?
Sorry, I can answer that as well. So yes, so just as in well balanced at the levels below intermediate and below, you'll be able to achieve the 8 revolution feature on both spins, and that would bump up your spin by a level. For novice, junior, and senior, the 8 revolution feature can be achieved once per program.
So at the lower levels of Excel, is a solo spin required to hold 8 revolutions to get a level 1?
No, so that's a little bit different than the well-balanced. I know, I believe it's at I want to say the preliminary level that you have to hold each spin for 8 revolutions to achieve a level 1 and then do some other.
And pre-do.
Right. And so in Excel, we don't have that as a requirement. So at those lower levels, if you achieve 1 difficult variation, for example, you will receive a level 1. And you don't have to hold the spin for 8 to do so.
Okay, thanks. And then one related to testing, but not necessarily an IJS question, is for competing at the national festival, do skaters who registered for a level up have to complete that test prior to the national festival? So like if a skater registered for preliminary but has her pre-test, does she have to complete that test prior to the national festival?
I'm sorry, Carissa, could you repeat that?
So if a skater has her pre-test and registers and skates up to preliminary, does she have to complete that preliminary test prior to competing at the national festival?
No, they're permitted to compete up 1 level at any Excel competition, including the national festival.
Thanks. And then circling back to IJS questions, where's the best place to access the IJS webinars that have already been presented?
It's Patrick, and I can answer that. So PSA did one about 6 months ago. It's on the Skate PSA website. I'm blanking on the actual name of it. I think we called it IJS, the basics of IJS. But if you want to email Carissa, the email address, Carissa, you can send it on to me and I'll get them the link. It's all on the Skate PSA website under webinars.
Okay. Thanks. And then going back to spins, do you have to hold the basic spin position for 2 rotations before switching to a feature in a solo spin? Or can you go right into a feature?
I can answer that. So you don't have to hold the basic position. You can go right into the feature. There's no requirement to hold, for example, a basic camel position before you attempt a difficult variation in a camel.
Okay, great, thanks. So that just about wraps it up for the Excel webinar. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who joined us, as well as to all of our presenters. And like I said, we'll be sending out a lot of information afterwards, so make sure to look from that, just because I know you wanted one more email from me. So
Thank you so much, Carissa. And thank you for everyone who came on and helped present tonight. Elliot, Mark, and Patrick, you're all incredibly knowledgeable, and thank you for supporting the program, as well as everyone who attended tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.